Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about the Season 4 Shrouded Affix, which is coming up on a PTR and it's available for testing right now. Spent a couple hours testing it, both healing and tanking, as you can see here from some of our VODs. And I wanted to kind of give you guys a quick explanation as to what it does at the moment, and some of my thoughts as to how fun, interesting, and what would make it more fun and interesting. Especially on PTR. There were a lot of changes last season to the relics, to the encrypted affix, and I really hope to see a couple of particular changes for the Shrouded setup. So what it does is, at the beginning of a dungeon, you have one of the brokers who will let you pick a secondary stat to buff throughout the rest of the dungeon. If you don't pick one there, it'll automatically default to just giving you Versatility. Okay? So whenever you make your selection, you get one stack, and that one stack gives you 2% crit, haste, versatility, or like 69 mastery rating, because mastery percentages are always different for people. With that, every single time that you encounter one of these Dreadlords, there's like 17 Dreadlords scattered throughout these dungeons, and of course they're Season 4 dungeons, so it could be something really on the rails like Grimrail Depot, no pun intended, or it could be something very large and spread out like Lower Karazhan or Junkyard, where you could just have them all over the place, all crazy spread out. But for my testing, the most that you could get was 20 stacks. I went around at the end of some of the dungeons and tried to find all the different locations that they had for the Dreadlords. Every time you kill one of the basic Dreadlords, these are the like nathrezim infiltrators. Every time you kill one of them, you get one stack. So the infiltrators don't have too much of a threat to them. They have these claws that'll deal a bunch of damage to the tank and then heal themselves, the vampiric claws. You have a carrion swarm frontal, and if you get hit by the frontal, you get a really nasty healing receive debuff. And then, of course, they have the sleep cloud that you'll see similar to the Lords of Dread encounter. If you step in it, you fall asleep. And if you're falling asleep, you have to get dispelled. Because none of the damage is actually going to break you out. So it can be very, very nasty in areas like Grimrail, or even in some parts of Workshop, which are like very, very tightly jam-packed together when you're fighting these Dreadlords. So if you get slept, you're in very big trouble, especially if you're a healer. Whenever you end up killing one of these infiltrators, you'll get one of the cartel brokers comes up and they sort of just trap the guy, and you get part of like the Relic buff that you get. It's whenever you kill the Relic, you get a healing. You get a heal, you get mana, and you get cooldown reduction. With the restoration buff that you get from the nathrezim infiltrator dying or getting captured, all you get is health and mana return. So it's still really good. It happens in a much shorter window of time. It's like 5 or 6 seconds instead of like the 10+ second buff that the Relic gives you. So it's very quick, but you don't have to worry about mana as a healer, which is always a plus for us. So those are like 16 or 17 nathrezim infiltrators that are all over the dungeon. A lot of times they're not too terribly deadly. Some of the things that I would just watch out for is pretty much the frontals are really, really nasty, because they'll just pivot, turn around, and aim at any sort of random player. And when it comes to their impact in the dungeon, they're not really that debilitating. It's not like a pride spawns and you have to stop everything you're doing and just only focus that. You can kind of cleave it down with everything else. As long as you're dodging the frontals, as long as you're dodging sleep clouds, it'll end up dying at some point. But especially when you have a lot of dangerous pulls, maybe you do want to go and kill it and focus it down so you get the 2% stat buff. And of course, you're going to get the healing and mana that'll come and just sort of top off the entire group. Now, there also is another mob called zolgamux, and there's only one of them throughout the entire dungeon. And when you kill it, it gives you 3 stacks, so it gives you 6% of your buff. A lot of times I was taking versatility, because Verse is just like super strong. And this Dreadlord destroys people. The Shadow Claws like stacks up a debuff onto your tank. Really, when I was tanking, it was around like 2, 3, 4 stacks where I really noticed it, where it was dealing a lot of damage to me, and that's where I needed to dispel. There's a Shadow Eruption that just kind of bursts out of the Dreadlord herself, and you have like a massive 70% heal reduction, so you're pretty much dead if you get hit by that and something else. The Hypnosis Bat puts like a hypnosis onto a player, and when that happens, they get a massive dot on them and a shield that must be broken by players. Pretty much every single time, our players just instantly fell over and died. So that was not great. some of the times the Hypnosis Bat would be out, and it would happen at the same time as this Blood Barrier, similar to Hakar, where she will shield herself and then just start siphoning blood, which also is healing her. So this is absolutely a mob that you need to stop whatever you're doing and start focusing it down. And a lot of times it got to the point where the extra 3 stacks of secondaries didn't really seem that worth for how long it would take to kill it. Maybe there's going to be some more nerfs to it, but this is where I most start thinking about this affix and the risk reward to it, because there's not so much of like a kiss curse effect that happens to it. It's more of the curse being, you have to take extra time to kill this. You also have to take extra time to focus it down. You have to take the extra time and energy and effort to figure out where it is in the dungeon and plan around it, because you might be using some Season 3 strategy in Tazvesh, in Season 4, accidentally come across this zolgamux mini-boss, and it'll just completely ruin your day. We had a number of wipes and deaths and everything going on with this mob, and part of that is because of tuning, and they could always sort of tune it down and everything. But even then, when they make it so that it's something that you need to turn, focus, kill down as quickly as you can, it starts eating away your damage that could go towards other mobs. It makes it so it's something you have to like dedicate a lot of specific time to, and it's not giving you any trash count. That is where I'm most curious as to how they can sort of spice it up, because keep in mind, the buff that you get is just secondary stats. So if you have, 1, 2, 3, 4 stacks at the beginning of a dungeon, cool. If it's haste, okay, maybe it's a little bit more noticeable. But versatility, while it's very strong, it's nothing that's like big and exciting and in your face that you have there. So I think one of my big issues with this affix is that it's not very exciting or doesn't give you a lot of great feeling, even though the power levels that it does give you are very great. You just don't really feel it unless you're just sitting there staring at like your damage hits and you're like, wow, there's like a 20% buff to my hits by the end of the dungeon, and we just run the boss over. Like, all right, great. But it's nothing big and flashy the way that the relics give you in terms of like the cooldown reduction that you get. So one of my biggest preferences right now would be how they could sort of brainstorm up some different solutions or make some different sort of effects. One of the most notable things for this season is there's no Shroud. We had Shroud effects with Awakening, we had Shroud effects with Woe, and I think that those are really super interesting sort of buffs that you're getting throughout the dungeon that can help you with your routing quite a bit. And I would definitely miss the Woe Relic, for example, in Tazvesh Gambit, and even parts of Streets as well. And I think the Dreadlords are also kind of a perfect opportunity to put on some extra sort of disguise. If they were able to have the Woe Relic, for example, effect where you get your little Shroud bubble, but you could disguise yourself as a mob from that dungeon. So whenever, the mini-boss, for example, goes down and dies, you have this one time throughout the dungeon where you're disguised, you're fast, you're taking some less damage, just like the Woe Relic from this current season, and at this point you look like a worker on the Iron Docks or something like that. I think that would be a really cool sort of aesthetic type of boost. Personally, as a healer, I loved the cooldown reduction from Season 3. I think that was also a good mix of like power and impact, and getting to see your cooldowns coming back more rapidly was always really nice and interesting. So it kind of feels bad getting, just flat stats. Because the other thing for healers is a lot of your abilities don't really deal a lot on their own. So just having flat versatility buffs to your damage is just kind of So that's definitely not my favorite thing when it comes to the interest for healers. Otherwise, when you're healing this, oh my god, dispel everything. If there's a debuff, just dispel it, because all of the Dreadlords, all of the debuffs, all the nastiness that they put out is extremely, extremely important to deal with. It was really interesting. It was a massive dose of nostalgia to go through those Warlords dungeons. Although, you really notice we had like Sanguine and Quaking going on as we were running through like Grimrail Depot, and oh my god, those are some of the most toxic affixes. Like, I'm definitely not an all-star tank by any means, but man, those affixes were not very fun. So depending on how long this season is supposed to end, I don't know if it's going to be like a 10-week rotation like we usually have, or if it might be trimmed down to like 4 or 6 weeks or something. Hopefully, they don't have some toxic combinations that would sort of shut people out of playing through those dungeons. So overall, I would say this affix at the moment is It's a lot better than some of the affixes we had, sort of like Beguiling. I think it's a little bit better than Prideful, I would say. Because I think Prideful was really, really sort of debilitating towards a lot of your routing. It was super impactful towards some of your routing. It does feel like it's trying to be a lot lighter and a lot more simple, sort of similar to Reaping. But I think Reaping also gave you that added benefit of, hey, I can just start cleaving everything down. Hey, we can kind of line of sight, and we have this sort of fun effect that gets added into it. So it's not quite as fun as Reaping is, but I think if they started adding some greater benefits and more, and not so much in the way of power, but in terms of the fun and how much notice that you get over killing a Dreadlord, capturing a Dreadlord, what kind of buffs are we getting into that? Seems like we kind of get some corruption buffs, and that's about it. It seems in a lot of cases for the more open dungeons, kind of like Junkyard, which I guess was already the strat in Junkyard, to kill all the trash first. But even in something like Lower Karazhan, it seems more incentivized to run around, kill all the trash first, get all these Dreadlord buffs, and then just stomp the living daylights out of the bosses when you have 15, 20 stacks of this extra secondary stat buff, you know? I'm like, that's all right. This isn't going to be some crazy long season, but I wish there was something a bit more sort of in our faces, a little bit more hyped up and interesting for us as well. Otherwise, you know, dealing with like the Hypnosis Bat and how much damage you're going to be taking from like the Blood Siphons and Blood Barrier, how much you need to be able to kill that stuff. There's a lot that they could be doing in terms of the tuning, and I'm sure we're going to see that over the next couple of days and couple of weeks and everything before this goes live. But yeah, give me your thoughts. What would be more interesting? What kind of buffs could they actually add to it to make these affixes more noticeable, in your face, and rewarding? Big thing is, what would be more rewarding to you guys? All right, let me know what y'all think. Otherwise, be sure to catch the live stream as well. We'll be doing more PTR keys this week, as well as, of course, some more live keys going forward. All right, all the socials at the bottom. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.